Good morning, Hacksters! Welcome to Hackster Café. We are here today with Justine Haupt, whose phone kit, which you might have seen around last year. It is a rotary dial cell phone, and yes, it works as a complete cell phone. And also, Justine is the creator of numerous products at Sky's Edge, and is an accomplished engineer, and also an astronomy engineer. Is that right?
Yeah.
You've got all kinds of cool stuff going on. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good.
Awesome. So, could you tell us first a little bit about your background? And I'm really interested in your journey from wherever you began through all this astronomy stuff, and now you're also running your own robotics company while still doing astronomy technology. It seems like you've got so much cool stuff going on.
Yeah. So I actually I started kind of just was starting. Oh man, I'm rambling.
It's cool. It wasn't really a question.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about your work in astronomy?
Sure. Okay, so I started on this project. It's now called the Vera Rubin Observatory. Here I work at my day job is at Brookhaven National Lab, and kind of before that, I was just for fun, like working on a telescope at a local public observatory and doing my own other projects, and then I kind of fell into working on this big dark energy dark matter survey telescope that we're building in Chile. And now that project's wound down for quite a while, and now I'm working on actually a quantum information project that also involves telescopes, kind of point to point communication over the air with telescopes. So we're building something like an observatory on one of the tall buildings here at the lab. I can almost see it out my window, actually. And,
Which lab are you at right now?
Brookhaven Lab, which is on Long Island, and then the other one will be at Stony Brook University, which is 20 kilometers away line of sight. So this is part of a much bigger effort here, but it's a lot of, so I don't even have anything, there's not even anything about it online yet anyway. There are no papers yet or anything. It's pretty new, but that's exciting. Anyway, that's a really partial answer, but that's that.
Well, you've got a lot that people can look at on your website here, including this. We've got a little bit of an echo. No?
Oh, is it from me?
Maybe, yes. Oh, it seems a little better now. Cool. So you've got this calibration drone for radio astronomy, for example. Can you tell us about that project?
Yeah. We're building a radio telescope. We've built a radio telescope here. It's kind of a demonstrator radio telescope, a small version of what we would hope would be a large array. Do you still hear the echo?
No, it sounds good now.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So this is the website for the project we hope to get funded called Puma. But for now we built ourselves like a small ragtag four dish radio telescope interferometer right here at Brookhaven Lab in a water basin, like an old basin, which has benefits. And it's the wooden parts. It looks pretty crude, but it's cool, And anyway, so the drone calibration is becoming the preferred or the way people would want to do calibrate this kind of radio telescope, because calibration is especially important for the kind of thing we're trying to do. And basically you want to have some calibration radio source, and then picture you have this radio source and you want to raster it over the telescope in a particular pattern, and then you can map the sensitivity versus position on the sky. And so how do you do that cheaply? So drones. So the drone project is what that comes from.
And so there's enough stability in the drone's control that you can raster it over there and really map it perfectly?
Yeah, we don't actually need to have where the drone actually winds up going isn't so important, as long as we know where it wound up going with maybe a differential GPS, a GPS that uses more than one receiver to do some trickery to get really high accuracy, and then so the actual the path it flies doesn't matter as much as knowing what the actual path was. So even if it's a random thing, but we've only done a little bit of work on that so far. I have like too many projects here at the lab, and I make sure I only do the fun projects. So, but I wanted it with too many of them. But yeah, that's a fun thing that's happening.
What's the most fun project you're working on?
Actually, right now it's this quantum thing because it's my first I actually submitted a proposal and got funded as a principal investigator. So it's kind
Wow,
of cool
congrats.
the having some like I can basically do what I want and I have access to the funding and it's like wow, this is cool.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's so cool. And as someone who's really not familiar with that, but I'd love to understand, would you be able to give like a layperson's description of this quantum thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, I can. So if quantum computers are becoming a thing,
Mm-hmm.
which they are, and we live in a world where quantum computers exist and you want to start to network them and it's not useful to network them with a classical network to maintain the quantum benefits. The whole thing needs to be quantum, which is hard to do.
Huh.
um, and not only that, but outside of networking quantum computers with each other, there's really amazing, you know if you're doing something like interferometry, like in astronomy, taking high resolution radio telescope pictures with interferometers, arrays of telescopes, like the VLA, like from the movie
Hmm.
Contact or things like that. You can imagine. So the limits of how accurate that can be are really, we've reached those limits where the equipment is as good as it can be, but they're classical limits. And if you network them in using a quantum technique, which I won't get into, you have a whole new um, limit, and you can get much higher quality and higher resolution, and you could do it with optical telescopes, not just radio telescopes, which would be mind-bogglingly good.
Hmm.
So it's not just there are many other applications, sensing applications like that, where you can just do things that you never thought you could do before if you can do this quantum networking, which involves transmitting single photons over long distances with certain quantum states, and then and
Oh,
communicating
wow.
on the other end. Um,
That's so cool.
yeah, and so no one is really sure how to do it yet. China is actually leading, so the U.S. is trying to catch up. That not not that I care, but we're getting funding for it, and so people were trying to figure out how to do this. Do you do it over fiber optics? You do it by over the air with beaming photons literally through telescopes over between 2 points. So no one knows. So we're doing it both ways. What I'm working on, these telescopes for this, is a small part of the project. That our main, our main real lead scientist is named Eden Figueroa. Is it's this big collaboration that he's leading between Stony Brook University and Brookhaven Lab, and I'm my part of the project that I'm the responsible for, which I got this funding for, is the telescope part, which is it's fun though. I mean, we're building a little observatory, what is essentially an observatory on one of the roofs that, like I said, that I can almost see out my window. Um, it's great fun.
That's so cool. And congrats on your funding and the PI position. That's so cool. So, you have all this amazing background, and yet, you went viral last year for this Rotary on smartphone kit, and you have lots of ideas about open source and opinions about how we should be able to control, what we're doing and stuff. So, can you tell us a bit about why you built this kit and how you built it?
Yeah, well, it didn't start as a kid at
Of
all. I mean,
course, right?
yeah, and this is what you have on the screen is the new one I'm working on now. So like few years ago, I was, I've been collecting rotary dials for a long time, thinking I would use them as some kind of a input device for something. I don't know. It's not something you see people using. I was thinking of just making a num pad, like a number pad for a computer that would be a rotary dial. Then I thought, oh, if I'm going to do this, why not? Oh, yeah. I was browsing Adafruit website, and she had something called the Phona, which is
Right.
basically a cell phone development board. And I'm like, oh, if I use that with a rotary dial, I could make a new kind of phone that uses a rotary dial input numbers. No, but it was like, that's the early prototype with just the phone from Adafruit and an Arduino and a rotary dial, just to prove to myself that it wasn't too hard to make a complete working phone this way. And then this is just for
Wow.
fun, just like a back burner project, which is a distraction, and that I felt like I shouldn't be working on because I have too many other things to be working on, which is
Yeah.
always. And then I packaged that into a 3D printed kind of thing that I could carry in my pocket. And okay, thank you. And okay, so if you scroll down a little bit, maybe I show the next thing that turned into. Yeah, okay, so scroll down some more, keep going. Um,
Oh, look at this.
Yeah, and then I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I should lay out an actual printed circuit board and do it, for real, which is what that
Oh yeah,
and
here we go.
yeah, and because I was dead set on doing it as simple as possible and just plugging wires into each other. I can't do it. I mean, I just every time I do that, I'm like, oh, I could just go to the ultimate extreme. So I laid out the board, and it turned kind of into that. And then if you and then I and then that I guess this is the one that is this still, no, this isn't even the one that went viral. This is then I made another version which is much
Mm.
sleeker looking, which I have somewhere that you see. Um,
I'll see if I can find it.
yeah,
Oh,
okay.
it's on the same page, maybe. Here we
It,
go.
it should be on the same
So
page.
here's your PCB layout.
Yeah, there's
Oh, and what
green
did you make this in?
KiCad.
Ah, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I use
open
KiCad for
source all the
everything.
way.
Okay, so
Super cool.
there is it coming together, the much sleeker version. You see it on
Yeah.
the bench, and
Ooh,
now it's starting to look like, almost like something you'd buy. And I put these e-paper in the back, and I curved it.
sexy.
I just like went all out. And this is just a personal. It's just like I wanted to use it as my primary phone because I hate smartphones. I don't have a smartphone, and use this as my phone. And I did. And then everyone was asking me to sell it, and I'm like, no, I don't want to sell it. I'm not in the business of making nobody. This is a stupid thing to begin with. I mean, who's going to want a rotary phone, cell phone? And meanwhile, I was trying to start my company, Sky's Edge, which I don't really think of as a company. It's like an open source lab kind of thing that it's like my invention. Like it's just an outlet, a creative outlet, and to make robotic stuff. And I was literally sending emails to people saying, I'm not going to sell this phone. I'm too busy trying to start a company.
Life sometimes has other plans for us.
So
Although you're still
yeah,
selling your robotics
yeah. So
components.
that's still really the thing I think will be the longer term future of what I'm trying to do. But yeah, but anyway, I wound up turning it quickly into a kit and produced about 100 of them, a little bit more, and they sold out pretty quickly. That was early last year, and I realized right away that I was going to need to do this. It was a really kind of an advanced build, not something everyone or hardly anyone would be comfortable putting together. A lot of hands-on soldering, a lot of just really weird finesse type work.
I saw a
Uh,
video. Wasn't there actually some hacksawing involved as well?
yes, a hacksaw required for that. It required taking a rotary dial out of a vintage phone and modifying it and all sorts of stuff. I made a whole video on how to
Mhm.
do it. And I thought, wow, if it and meanwhile the momentum was building. I was getting more and more emails about people wanting them, and I'm like, oh wow, I should really just do yet another total redesign and make it like really make a really polished thing, like which is the ultimate, and something I could maybe mass produce. It would still be a kit, but maybe I could mass produce it fully assembled eventually if I can figure out FCC licensing and things like that. So that's
Right.
what I'm working on now, and I'm hoping to release it in a few months actually. And now it's like now I have an OLED display in the front. I have a real mechanical brass bell inside. I have I mean, there's all sorts of things about it that Oh, and injection molded parts. I'm working with manufacturers in China, so it turned into this whole thing that went off on its own. And that I'll be producing. I think once I start making it, kind of indefinitely, as long as there's demand. My initial production batches here are going to be like 1,000 units of each part, so that'll get me through next year at least, and then I'll produce more. But yeah, it's exciting. I never thought that would happen. I mean, it was bizarre. It was really bizarre.
I mean, you have some points on the website yourself about why you use it, and it seems like that struck a chord with lots of people. Like, for example, down here on the kit page, which we have linked below, there's this question: in what ways is it a more functional telephone than a smartphone? And for one thing, I didn't realize that you have this this flexi e-paper screen acts, as you say, like to show relevant messages on the top part, pager style, and that's so cool. Like that's something that modern smartphones don't have. And then also you have yeah, here we go, better reception because the antennas aren't packed against the electronics. You don't have to navigate an operating system to get the phone application, and you have physical cutoff switches for power and for the microphone, which are like really sort of privacy features that you don't get in a smartphone. It's
Yeah, yeah. And also, and not only that, but people are like, "Oh, you don't want to have to dial a whole rotary dial every time you dial a number." But that's not how you use it. You use the rotary dial to bring up a quick dial. To quick dial, to go to quick dial people. Like, maybe it's only two turns of the dial. And actually, if you compare that to asking some random person with a smartphone to call a specific person. By the time they swipe to the requisite menus and bring everything up, unless it's by voice command, I think I can do it almost always faster with this rotary phone. And then for certain people like my husband, I just have a hard key coded to him. I mean, I just push that button and he's being dialed, and that's, you can't beat that. I mean, the smartphone can't do that. I can't stand smartphones. I can't tell you. I could go on and on about that. The interface, the way, oh my goodness. But yeah, there's a few things about it that in some ways are actually more functional than the standard phones.
On the original project as well, you mentioned how, like, if you want to change something about it, you just change it. It's programmed in Arduino, is that right?
Yeah, well, the original one was literally an Arduino. Then the second one was like I just took the microcontroller, and not Mega 2560, which is the microcontroller used in an Arduino Mega, and put that on my own board, but it still uses the Arduino language and bootloader. So it's for all intents and purposes an Arduino, and the new one is like that also. You can program it with the Arduino IDE, and it uses that, syntax.
That's so cool. And you've upgraded the cellular part of it as well. So it used to
Oh,
be this Adafruit Phona.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Well, you also reminded me the big problem with the original one, because I didn't know any better. The original one was using an Adafruit Phona, which is the 3G thing, and the
Hmm.
3G networks are all going to be going offline, and it takes a special kind of stupid, I'll tell you, to go through like all the effort I did to make that phone and realize that the networks are shutting down. I mean, I didn't.
You were finishing a project that was awesome, and like, I don't know,
Yeah,
not everything's
it
too
was
perfect at first.
frustrating.
I can
But
see that.
even if I wanted to continue that version, I realized it wouldn't. I wanted something that people would be able to use indefinitely, or for at least another decade, and myself. So it had to be 4G. So this can handle 2, 3, and 4G.
So what
5G
did you
as well.
switch to?
Oh, which module? It's a U-Blox Toby, Toby, that's the cellular transceiver, but now it's not a dev board. I had to actually design it right into my board and handle all the analog, the RF issues. And actually, although I do get into some antenna design stuff myself, there's a friend who I've made over the course of this project in England who's been helping doing some RF analysis too, and it's a bit more involved. It's quite a bit more involved than the first version or
But
third
you have
version.
a lot of, yeah, it seems like you've got a lot of experience with the radio stuff from your work with the astronomy technology.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just fun. Antennas are cool.
Cool. And so you mentioned also that this is intended to last you for the next decade, which is definitely something that, in this era of planned obsolescence is something that's very not in vogue, I guess, among the larger technology companies, but it's very much seems to be part of your ethos. You have this treatise on patents and open source technology, for example, and it seems to fit really well with the sort of right to repair and durability and sustainability kind of ideals. This is a really fascinating read.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, I read a lot of science fiction, and it's like in like and like in the Foundation trilogy, the spaceships are like hundreds of years old, and it's like, that should be how it is. I mean, I hate even cars. I mean, you have this huge hunk of metal and plastic, and usually just a few small pieces wear out, and there's a lot of things like that, but especially with smaller things that are able to be designed to last forever, and they're just not because of the way the companies operate and the way, and because of people's consumers' expectations. Oh, I
Which are
forgot where
shaped by
I
the companies.
say again.
So I feel like those expectations are shaped by the companies as well.
Yeah, and there are other companies. I mean, even like a dishwasher manufacturers. I have another friend here, an engineer who, I mean, we know, absolutely know that there are companies that build into, for example, a dishwasher. They have the firmware right to the EEPROM every time the thing starts up, which reduces the lifespan of the chip, and they do this intentionally so that the main board will die eventually. It's like, bullshit.
Wow.
And this is, and then everything everyone knows now about how Apple, and I'm convinced that my old Roku boxes are not running as fast as they should, and I feel like there's firmware updates going on to slow them down. So that kind of thing, we just need to stand up and be like, do our own open source thing, and I don't know. It's annoying. Oh, my husband just posted my wife.
I actually, I deleted a comment that said that she's so pretty because I didn't want the comments to go that way. But then it turns out that's your husband. That's so awesome. Sorry, David.
And I see other friends here, Steve. And, yeah, okay.
Everyone's being really cool. I love. We do have this question that you've already answered, but you do sell it as a kit right now. But you've thought about doing an assembled one in the future, right?
Yeah, so many people have asked that I would like to be able to just make a complete phone, but there's kind of a different expectation when you're selling a phone that you would have customer support and just a whole another kind of level of expectation when you're actually buying a complete phone versus a kit, even though it would be just as functional.
Right.
So and then also if it's not a kit, there's the FCC needs to get involved and license it and all that. So I have to figure that out, but maybe eventually. But the kit is pretty easy. It's not done yet. I'm still working on it, but it's the intent is that it's easy. If you can make a model, let's say like an old Model model, not model. What is the company? Anyway, if you can make a model, you could build this phone. There's no soldering and things like that.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the questions. It's no soldering, no glue, and no cutting. You should be able to put it together in a short afternoon with a screwdriver or two, tweezers, and a careful hand. It's so good.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that if you sell it as a kit, then you don't have to deal with the FCC stuff. And also, you mentioned the not having to support it as much.
Yeah, I mean, there's a form, and of course, I do what I can, but I'm only one person with answering emails.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it would have to be like a real company then, if and yeah.
I see what you mean. And, it reminds me of how people always kind of push other people to do Kickstarters. They're like, just do it. It'll be, and it's like, no, it's not just easy money. It's so much work.
Yeah, and I kind of intentionally avoided that because I had enough people emailing me that would just wanted to know about it, and that I just kind of spammed my whole list of people that signed up to hear about it, and they said, hey, I'm going to start pre-orders and this will fund it, and so I did my own like internal kind of Kickstarter, and so the pre-order sales
That's
have been
really
really
interesting,
good.
actually. So you sort of, as you say, did your sort of own Kickstarter by taking pre-orders for this in order
That's
to.
right. Yeah, and another thing. Here's another thing. People get really, will put down the idea of starting your own company, and maybe rightfully so, because so many of them fail. But I mean, they don't. It doesn't fail if you do it the way I do it, which is like you have your hobby and you start selling things out of your house, and there's nothing to fail because you don't have venture capital funding, you don't have a board of directors. It's just don't. It's like guerrilla company starting. I don't know. It's really easy to have success if you just take it slowly and just wait for just to do your own thing. And that was
Interesting.
random, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, that's cool. And it brings us back to your Sky's Edge company, where you also have these other pieces that you've been releasing. So you've got these motor controllers and also special. I found this story really interesting about your robo wheel. Is it that you were designing this because you couldn't find anything on the market that suited your needs, and by the time that you had it sort of you realized there was something new on the market that fit it, but you could still release it in your own way as a white label. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I was designing what is essentially what you see in the screen here, a large hub motor that wasn't like sourced out, cannibalized from a hoverboard or something, sort of built in. And then by the time got it to the point where I was kind of getting the prototype working, there's Chinese manufacturers making that kind of thing. So so I wasn't. I've said I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. That sounds so stupid. But I decided to have them, to order them to sell, import it basically and put my label on it. Now most companies do that, and they you have all these things, especially on Amazon, being sold, and there's all these nonsense company names associated with them, and you don't know what's what and who designed it or what. And so I just wrote right on the label a white label product, which is what that is when you import something and then rebrand it, a white label product from Sky's Edge. And so I have, those. It's a pretty good thing, and I've been using the wheel in my own experimental robot. And but actually, I think I am going to wind up going back to designing an open source one at some point, because there is some things I want to do. Anyway, that's what happened with that.
And tell us about this brushless motor controller as well. I'm really curious about the problems that you're solving here because you're working on building large domestic robots. And what needs are these filling that you weren't able to find on the market at the time?
Yeah, so I mean, if you have a brushless motor, what you want is to drive it in a way that it kind of doesn't just start spinning really fast immediately, which is what like if you buy a so-called ESC for drones or something like that, that's how they work. No one was selling one that would let it work, with just kind of this really arbitrarily slow motion or positioning or what have you. And I did not want to make this. I did not want to make a controller to do that because it's like that. Heck, that's a lot of work. And but I couldn't find one. No one was selling something that could do that. That didn't cost like $400 as like industrial controls equipment or more, or a lot more. So I did. I wound up making that board, and again, that I only produced 100 of the first batch. They sold out, and now I'm working. I have this page is for the upcoming version, which is also distracting me from the phone, which isn't good. Or the phone is distracting me from this because this is the original idea. Anyway, I don't know if I answered the question. So it's basically an off-the-shelf open source. Of course, all of the design files are like right there. I don't hide them. Motor controller for 2-channel control. Although that's actually it's not up yet because this is the new version. I didn't, like firmware,
Right.
electrical mechanical license. If you go to the older version of the board, it's all there. You just KiCad files, step files, is all there. Yeah, to the right there.
Cool.
And that's, I know people say they're open source and they do that and that's good, or it's really hard to find the information or it's not documented well, which is annoying. Or you have other companies that say they're open source and it turns out only like a small subset of what they're doing is open source, which I do not like,
Right.
because you get into it with this expectation that you'll be able to do your own thing with it. And then you hit this roadblock where you get to the closed source core of whatever their thing is. And that happened to me recently, actually. And I
Oh
went to
no.
a company, and I was really pissed. It's like you're called open. I won't say the company, but you're called that, and you're not. It's like, damn. You don't need to keep it closed source to be profitable and have success. I mean, you're more successful. You get to be more successful by sharing it. It's amazing how it works.
And this is part of your open source rant, self-described open source rant as well, about how people think that patents are necessary in order to be profitable. And you do have all these alternative, like you point out, like how it is equally or more profitable to make it accessible for people, to allow people to take it and like work with it and sort of really get it into the community, as opposed to it being this sort of really gated thing. And also you have your own open source license, and you have a bunch of other options that you mention for people who can't or don't want to go fully open source or whatever, like ways that are in between, which I think is really cool. You're not just complaining, you have all these solutions for how people can be a profitable company and still do fully or partially open source. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. I mean, actually, this has been changing as I go, and I just updated it again pretty recently because as my own philosophy changes, I missed with that one. Oh, is it compatible? Yes, it's definitely compatible to make money with open source projects, hardware projects. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like, I mean, one of the things I wanted to point out is that, people will say, "Oh, you didn't patent that. You're not going to patent that." And they don't understand that, for the most part, people aren't going to steal your idea because they don't want it. If you publish some design and you think it's the greatest thing in the world, I guarantee you that no one's ever going to try and sell it. That's not what, if there's a manufacturing company that's in the business of stealing other people's intellectual property to reproduce it and sell it for a profit cheaper on Amazon or whatever, they're not going to find some random back alley website and say, oh, that's the thing. They need to know that it's successful and people want it, and that it's something that's already selling before you get to that point. So there's this built-in grace period when you release open source hardware where people start buying it because they're interested in it, and then only then, once it becomes pretty big, do other companies start to take notice and say, oh, maybe we should get in on this. And then at that point, you wouldn't want them to just take your design data and just reproduce it exactly and sell it out from under you, because that sucks and that's just stealing. It's hard to prevent that. even with a patent, you can't prevent that. I mean, you have bad actors in other countries that are doing heavy duty manufacturing, and patent's not even going to help. It's just absolutely useless. So at the very least, I hope that, why I was looking for a license, and maybe it exists and I haven't found it yet, but I was looking for an open source license that basically says, reproduce this on your own for your own use, or use it for development, or use it as a stepping stone to your own product, or improve it and re-release the improved version, but don't just copy it exactly. And that's kind of I didn't know of an open source license that does that, so I just say here that I use the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license with the additional following stipulations, two of which, and the main one is the first one, of course, that it forbids. This isn't legalese, so I don't even know if this is going to hold up in any kind of court, but my philosophy anyway is that you should forbid just duplicating something and reselling it. There should be some substantive, and how you define substantive, but there should be some
Right.
remarkable difference that means that you're not just copying somebody else's work and stealing it. But that I would also want, like if someone's going to make a very advanced system of some kind and it needs some kind of circuit in it, or you just take my schematic and look, that's how you do it. Just use that schematic. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, but don't just resell it as is. That's kind of the gist of what I'm thinking.
Right, and it's interesting to me, this naming part of it as well, where you talk about Turtlebot, Turtlebot 2 and 3, where they're actually completely separate projects, but they have, they're separate forks that are all in development. It's not like the first one and then the second one replaced it and the third one replaced it. Like, it's like they're all alternatives that are coexisting, and the names don't really make that clear.
Yeah, it's so confusing. It's just comes with open source, I guess, because there's no centralized naming convention or someone making it. This speaks to a problem with open source in general, with documentation and not communicating what something is actually doing, and making it, in some cases, impossible to get into or contribute to an open source project without one-on-one communication with the community and asking questions, and the same questions wind up being asked again and again. My solution to that is just accept that writing good documentation has to be part of being a maker, or whatever you are. You have to. And then another, in what you're saying with the naming, drives me crazy. There's another example. So Turtlebot is a robotics, open source robotics platform, like you said, and now these other people forked off of the Turtlebot project to make their own open source versions of it, which is great. That's in the spirit of open source technology. But then they called it Turtlebot 2, and then Turtlebot 3, and then now I think there's a Turtlebot 4. So that's horrible. That's so confusing to someone just coming into it for the first time, saying, "Oh, which Turtlebot do I want? Of course, I want the newest one. I want the 3 or the 4." Whereas that's not what it is at all. So my thinking is you shouldn't even use, if you're going to fork one of my projects and turn it into your own thing, don't use any part of my name. You have to come up with your own name. Which isn't the best way of doing it, but it's a way of doing it. It should be like Linux distributions. You have Debian, Ubuntu, Red Hat, whatever. Each one has its own thing. You're not calling it Linux 1, Linux 2, Linux 3. That would be awful. Right? So that's what I was meaning with that.
That's legit. Echo again. My brain. Okay. I do find it useful in terms of, like, if you use Ubuntu and Raspbian, where you can sort of tell as there's a part of it that sort of takes the previous name. Like, I know that Raspbian is based on Debian and it's for the Raspberry Pi, but then you have things like CircuitPython, which is like MicroPython, but Adafruit's version, and it's not like AdaPython, it's like CircuitPython, but like MicroPython is also for circuits, and CircuitPython is also micro. Like, how do I know what the differences are? That would be so helpful.
Yeah. And actually, I don't mind those as much, because at least it's not adding a number after it.
That's true.
But yeah, it gets all of it gets so confusing. It's a barrier to entry for people wanting to do this stuff and get into it, or even for an experienced, dyed-in-the-wool engineer who's been working at, some wherever for 30 years, and they want to contribute to a project. I'm like, what the hell? It's not just the newbies that have trouble with this. It's like, really, if you're confused, assume that everybody else is confused. I would think.
So you're making these products. I was looking around on here, and these are designed for large domestic robots. That seems to be the sort of inspiration for these. Could you tell us about what your intent is with building large domestic robots? What do you want them to do? What inspired that interest?
Yeah, I mean, just like everyone, you grow up watching Star Wars and whatever else in R2D2, and you want to live in a world where those kinds of robots exist, and it's starting to happen, finally, and it's really
Hmm.
great, especially now that deep learning and neural network techniques have become a thing and accessible and all of that. Um, but I mean, to me, I'm not, it's like a lot of right now there's this trend, or at least in the past few years there's been this trend where companies think, okay, people want robots, but we can't actually figure out how to make a robot that does anything useful aside from vacuum. Important. So let's make what is it called, the kind of robot that just talks to you and is there to be like communicate with you. There's a name for it.
Companion robot?
Companion robots, which
Hey! I love them.
I know there's a place for that, but I mean, we have to make ones that have arms and that go and do dexterous things.
Totally.
Um, so that's what I want to do, and so I'm just kind of I haven't had time to work on this, what with my with day job and with the phone thing that went viral unexpectedly. But
Yeah.
on the page there on the left is the robot, my development platform robot that I have in the house that I've been kind of working with an NVIDIA Jetson, using the two of the robo wheels, and I mean, it doesn't have any arms yet. I just want to get to the point for my own, for my own development and understanding that it can navigate on its own and charge itself, so that it can be always on, so to speak, and it's something that's not an appliance so much as a member of the household that can manage
Cool.
its own self.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. With that, yes. Yes, 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 yes. I definitely want to add an arm, and I have a lot of ideas about what the arm should be like, because I feel like the way robotic arms are built nowadays are kind of. I mean, you don't want something that's jerky and it does this and makes a lot of noise while it's doing it. It should be
Mm.
noodly like a human hand, and I think you could do this kind of very dynamic motion with elasticity built in, with active continuous feedback from the motors that are controlling it, using a controller like the Near Zero, the motor controller I made, to make a more organic human-like arm with an end effector that is just as can do just as much work, but it isn't prone to the robot motion and vibration and all that kind of bad stuff. I think
Oh,
people are already starting to do that, actually, but I have ideas for how to do it on my robot. I don't know when or if this is really going to happen, because I'm so overwhelmed with other work, but it's
wow.
fun, so I'm going to get to it eventually.
You've got so many things going on, yeah. And I've heard about using, for example, muscle wire for a more sort of like slower, natural, smoother movement, but then you also have to build in like a counter uh, mechanism, I think, that like resists it and pulls it back to its original spot and things like that. And it can also be pretty slow, and sometimes the voltages are a little weird to work with. So if anyone comes up with a sort of noodly or more natural way to make motion happen, especially like without them being, like you say, jerky and like noisy and stuff, I think that would really help with them being perceived as like alive and also
Yeah,
just not being really annoying, honestly.
and not being annoying and not being too expensive, because the only way to
Right.
overcome that, traditionally the way you overcome the jerkiness is just to make it really heavy duty machine parts and all that stuff, and that's just a non-starter for something that someone's going to own in their house and be a commodity item. Yeah.
Speaking of things you own in your house and also large robots, we've got this large format printer, and I've seen you talk about this large format printer, but I haven't seen what you're using it for. You built your, like, A, it's really cool on its own that you built this thing, and B, I'm really curious what you're using it for.
Yeah, so I built this. This was well before the first phone, and I built it because I thought, oh, if I'm going to start a company, I want to be able to do my own production work, and I want to have like 4 extruders that can run in parallel and do 4 of the same thing at a time, or I can do
Wow.
one-off really big things if I need to. So I made it as my little basement factory, but in reality, what wound up happening is that I did produce all of the plastic parts for the first rotary cell phone release on this, but now that I've kind of moved from this phase of not ever having produced anything and then actually sold it to legitimately being able to say that I have a company and having products that I'm just finding it's a lot cheaper just go straight to injection molding, especially now that it's so affordable to do that overseas. So right now I just use it for random one-off things that are too big. Mostly other people come to me with things they need and I'm like, oh, Justine, can you print this? This doesn't fit in my printer. And I'll just use it for that. But it works. It works well. You see on the bottom there the quad tool head, the one that has 4 extruders on it. So it's interchangeable tool heads. They mount kinematically, so it registers well. That was it's as big as it can be while fitting in the basement. It goes almost up to the basement ceiling.
That's incredible. Look at all this gold foil on here. Is that mylar? It's very space.
Yeah, it's meant to be thermal insulation for that big heated build plate, which has 5 zones. But
right.
also just looks cool.
For that, you used 4 heated build plates and then like a thermal wire going around the edge?
Yeah, it's 4 silicone heaters underneath the aluminum substrate, let's say, plus a perimeter nichrome wire, which I use high temperature silicone to kind of pot in place to prevent edge fall off of the temperature. But to be honest, I think I went overboard. I could have just done the 4 heater zones, and that's AC. It runs off of AC too. It doesn't go through it goes straight to a variac. And there's AC relays to bang control each of the zones. I went overboard. I shouldn't have done that. It was too much. In fact, for the amount of money and time I spent on this printer, I should have just bought a bunch of maker gears because I have 2 maker gears, an M2 and an M3 that I love. And I love this printer. I think it's cool, but it probably wasn't worth all the effort it took and money.
So I was gonna say, if you were gonna build it again, what would you differently? And it sounds like you just wouldn't.
Yeah.
That's legitimate. It's like part of the learning process is knowing like what you should do yourself and what you should hand off.
And the funny thing is, I didn't learn. I mean, when I got my first 3D printer, it was like 2013 or something, 2012, 2013. A Maker Gear M2 was a kit. I was like, okay, I'm never. This is not to make 3D printers. This is not to get into making 3D printing hobby stuff. I just wanted to make my stuff I want to make. It's a tool. I will never make my own 3D printer. And I was like, as time went on, I just couldn't get the idea out of my head. And then, despite myself, it's just like, you shouldn't do it and you do it anyway, just get it out of your system.
Brilliant. And that is kind of what you did with this phone, which ended up being incredibly successful. And why don't we just take that same question and apply it to this? So you have made multiple versions of this. You made your prototype, you made the first kit, and you made the second kit. And one of the main things you talked about that you've upgraded in this is that it's much easier for beginners to put together. What else did you sort of learn from your previous iterations that you applied to this one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, none of the previous ones were meant to be assembled easily. They were just going to be one-offs. So that changed quite a few things.
Right.
I wanted the layout of the buttons and how I access different functions really went through a few. It's amazing. My husband especially, it drives him crazy, and me too. But I think it rubs off of him onto me, and it really started with him recognizing how bad user interfaces tend to be in the world in general, whether it's a web interface or whatever. And so it took me quite a few iterations in writing the software and laying out the keys to decide what was intuitive and what really worked, and that's expressed in this new version. And then the e-paper display is really cool. I love it, but it has a very slow refresh rate, and so it's not really great for immediately displaying an incoming phone number or showing the number that you're currently dialing. So I wanted to add the OLED display on the front.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. Then this isn't a real picture. I should emphasize this is like a teaser rendering, which is part real picture, part rendering.
Yeah, I love that. I had to look at it a few times to be like, is that? But yeah, you can see that, like, for example, these have the sort of render lines on them down here. I actually really love this image.
Okay, good. Yeah. I would have had a real photo if I had a complete. So far, even like this is going to change hopefully in the next maybe 2 weeks. But so far, what the phone really looks like is still only captured in my models and in my head. I've been waiting for various prototypes from various manufacturers, and I think I'll take real pictures of a real phone pretty soon. But it's I think cooler looking than I was able to express with this kind of teaser picture.
Yeah, the e-paper part is also really cool. Even though like it has this slow refresh rate, which you're offsetting with this other OLED there, just the fact of being able to like statically display an image on the back of the phone and have it be not suck down any energy while it's not changing actively because it's bistable, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're so underused, e-paper displays. They should be everywhere. I was hoping that
I think they're getting there. Like you've got like black, white, and red, or black, white, and green, or whatever. A lot of these ones
yeah,
are
you're
kind of
starting to
popping
see
up.
that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and if people don't know, they're bistable, so you can turn it. It doesn't need any energy at all. You turn the device off, and it still maintains whatever it's showing. It's really cool. And I mean, for this, it's not just a novelty. It's for the phone. It is still used for displaying the contacts list, and there's a lot of lines, display lines, so you can have like a complete list of people's names and phone numbers on the back of the phone. It looks like a piece of paper that you would have stuck on the back of a rotary phone, to be honest. But it's
Right, yeah, it's your own little like phone book.
yeah.
That's so cool. I gotta take a minute and just highlight all the different inspiration robots people have been sharing. You mentioned when you're talking about the domestic large format robot and like what your inspirations were, and it's like yeah, everyone kind of grew up with these the Tin Man, the Lost in Space robot. Robbie was really impactful. Robbie's awesome. Gort was the ultimate.
Oh, oh, I should mention Johnny Five too. Oh,
Oh yeah.
Johnny Five was really impactful for me.
Hmm.
Nobody mentioned that one.
Not yet, but
Well, darn
and then we had some positive feedback about your motor controllers. It's fantastic. So you've got
Oh,
like
thanks, Steve.
25 things going on, and before we wrap up here, I'd love to ask like what you've got this Sky's Edge that you're building. You've got the kit coming up. Is there anything else that's on your radar that's just like in the back of your mind and we'll let you go that might
uh,
show up soon?
oh yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Like a bunch of stuff. There's so many things I want to do.
Oh yeah, do you have a paragliding gadget in mind?
Oh, David, I do have a paragliding gadget in mind. I was actually just one flying this morning. I had a nice 20-minute
Oh,
flight.
amazing!
Yeah, yeah. Oh, flying is great. Yeah, I want to get into eventually even maybe electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, like, basically human-sized drones, which everyone's doing now. But I have my own ideas, of course, and I also want to do. I'm not going to worry about anybody stealing because if somebody else does it first, it'll be even better. But it would be neat to do a powered paramotor, a paramotor. Like a fan you put on the back of yourself for flying a paraglider that's electric, that's totally silent, like totally silent. And you need a really big propeller to do this, but there's ways of doing it. So it spins slowly. It's a big propeller. Um, and but it would be electric, and I'm thinking I want to have it be like a like power assist pedal powered, so basically a flying cycle, like an air cycle or a power cycle. It wouldn't have any wheels. You'd still take off and land on your own 2 feet. And you can't generate enough power at all with pedals to keep an aircraft like that airborne. But if you do power assist, where there's a kind of a torque sensor attached to pedals, and you're always adding some gain to what you're putting into the pedals.
Ah.
I mean, when as a kid, I think a lot of people dream about having a pedal-powered aircraft that would be silent and it's like a bicycle. It's like flying a bicycle, and that's really hard to do. You need to be an athlete, and it doesn't go very high, and it's hard to do.
Hmm.
But I don't think it has to be truly, totally pedal-powered to create the illusion of magic of flying around on a bicycle. I think if we do power assist where it's electric and only maybe 20% of the energy is actually coming from the pedals, and yet you're still using the pedal to control the amount of thrust. I think that could be really
Oh,
cool.
that's so cool. Oh,
Yeah,
like an electric assist bicycle, but for the air.
yeah, yeah.
You're speaking my language here. I
Oh,
also actually have had this exact same. I've been paragliding once, and it was the closest that I ever
oh,
felt
good.
to this dream of like silent flight. I
Yeah,
was on with someone like who was doing the actual flying, and
yeah. Camping
the
flight.
fact that
Yeah,
we could have like a regular conversation at regular tone, and the birds fly next to you because you're so quiet, and
yeah.
you do see those like those big fan ones where it's like a chair in front of a huge fan with a big parachute or whatever. But yeah, they're so noisy.
Yeah, that's the
And
prop, right? It's just a ruin. It kills it. I didn't. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
well, I'm
but
gonna be following this now. Where can I like watch for updates about this. You've got your website, obviously, justinehaupt.com, which is linked down below. Justine-Haupt. And then you've got...
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say I don't keep this as updated, just like you were saying about your site.
Yeah, the constant struggle. And then there's skiesedge.com, which is your... I love the description of this, by the way. You've got these interesting descriptions of, like, why you make Sky's Edge. You want it to be just like a way to have, engineering projects sort of fund people living their lives. And
yeah. Right. I mean, you get working at a big, formal place like a national lab, you get, really turned off to, you can't really be. You have some creative freedom, but you can do not enough.
So I'll be following you at those places, and then everyone stay tuned for the Rotary Unsmartphone Kit. And of course, also you can also see your papers on ResearchGate for if you're interested in the deep technology behind the latest in astronomy and telescopes. You can go follow Justine. I assume there's some follow away. I don't know, or check out her papers on ResearchGate, which is super cool. And
Yeah, somewhere, yeah.
cool. Oh yeah, paragliding with the owl robot. That'd be amazing.
Oh.
Anyway, I would love to have you back on anytime you have something new, especially if you do this air gliding thingamajig.
I mean, I didn't mean to say that. I mean, this is my own. I haven't said that to any, but you're the first. My husband didn't even know about that idea. I don't think so. Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks.
You heard it here first.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I love seeing everyone's comments come in. And Justine, this is amazing. I can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.